Hi, and welcome again to The Last Angry DJ. My name is Mitchell KC Hill. At the KC part, I got when we used to be on the radio back in the 70s on WFIL in Philadelphia and a few other places. But we love to talk about all things broadcast and imaging and radio and TV and podcasting. And I have sort of the job of talking about the way it used to be before there was internet. I was on the radio in the 70s and the 80s and a little bit into the 90s. And the guy that keeps me straight and on the narrow is the Canadian smirker himself, Mr. Alexander Knight. Alex, how are we today? There he is.
I'm doing really well, Mitch. Good to be here for episode 95 of The Last Angry DJ. You know, you kind of took the intro away from me there. You already explained to the audience what this show's about, so I don't think I'm going to spend any more time on that because we have a great guest today. But before we do, just going to introduce Mark Giuliani, who's an integral part of our show here on the panel, who knows a little bit something about broadcast and a little experience with radio. How's it going, Mark?
Hey, Alex, how are you doing? It's a great day to be here, and we have questions that are going to line up. So if you have a question for our guest, go to ask.thelastangrydj.com. That's ask.thelastangrydj.com, and let's get going to the show. Mitch, what do we have?
Thank you, Mark. And we do have a wonderful guest here who decided to join us actually very quickly. I was at a radio reunion dinner some Saturdays back, and this beautiful woman, this vision, came in and sat down two seats down right next to Rick Jensen and me. And her name is Cristy. And Tia, welcome to the show. Found out that Tia is not only a broadcaster, but also a coach, I guess, a coach for presenting stuff. Am I getting that correctly? What would your job title be?
Communication specialist or expert. I help people communicate better. So I travel the country talking with CEOs and celebrities, athletes. I've even worked with some royalty, and I teach them how to communicate better, whether it be in business or professional settings or in personal settings in the home life.
And what got you into that business? Did you go radio, then to TV, then to podcasting, then to presentation coach? How did you make that transition?
Well, I did skip the podcasting. I like being on other people's podcasts. I think it's amazing to be able to be here. And thank you for having me today. But I went from doing the radio thing to I got a TEDx, and after that went viral, and I was approached to help people do what I do. So I kind of was really intrigued by that when I was asked to help people do what I do, because I didn't understand what they were asking me at first. And then I started to build a program, and I realized that a lot of people struggle with communication, not only just struggling with communication in general, but people have a very high fear of speaking to others. So I come in and I help people really combat that fear. And when we get to a certain level,
I was going to say that's the number one. That's the number one fear that people have, is going in front of a bunch of people and speaking. And
do you know what it's called?
A triskaideka bunch of people in front of me. What is it?
It's glossophobia. Actually, it's called glossophobia,
it's the claustrophobia in a big hall. Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a fear of speaking, and it's high.
I'm really neurotic. And when I inhabit my radio persona, and I've got a little bit of that happening right now, I'm comfortable in front of a bunch of people. But when I'm myself, like at the dinner table or at a school event when I used to be in school, it really put me off. It really did. And I never got over it. And it was weird. And we'll talk a little more about this, but as a older radio guy that spent years on the radio, I slowly but got rid of that problem. But it was all part of my inhabiting my personality as a radio guy, because I felt safe there. It was a safety thing for me to have that presence. So, like when I walk into a room, and this is stuff that you probably teach in your course on a regular basis, is that I know how to make eye contact. I know how to be present in a Zoom meeting. And again, Zoom or Teams or whatever else you do. It used to be that you used to get dressed up in a fine suit and you'd go in and you do your presentation to a corporate presentation or whatever. Nowadays, it's how your Zoom meeting looks or your Teams meeting looks. We're inhabiting, the fine suit we used to wear. So anyhow, I sort of stumbled into it. I didn't do it professionally. And I do a little bit of, coaching because I produced a number of programs where I had a CEO of a corporation. And I said, hey, look, see all these people around you? We're all here to make you look good, relax. Don't make the common mistakes of using your hands too much or walking back and forth on the stage. So, the fact that you do this, did you do it because you did the TEDx? And by the way, while we're on the subject of TEDx, explain to people how hard that is to get in, because you just don't decide one day you're going to be a TEDx speaker. You have to go through all this other stuff. So how did you get there?
Yeah, that's amazing. So I always tell people, like with my clients, I let them know. We always hear that it's who you know. It's who you know in life, and that's how you succeed. But that's not the case. It's who knows you. And that's really where your success comes in. So you have to be visible in people's lives. And one of the things that I did was I always wanted to do a TED, and I made that known in a lot of the different things that I did. But also when I came out of radio, it was kind of a very surreal moment for me because, I had been in radio for, most of my life at that point. And when I was asked to do, because I was approached to actually do the TED. I thought that was so ironic because it was such a low time in my life, coming out of the pandemic. I wasn't working in radio. I really wasn't sure, I was in that crossroads moment. What am I going to do? Do I go back to radio? Do I continue on with my writing? And I have my website, Tips from Tia, where I do lifestyle tips. And that has, a very good following with it. But, what was I supposed to do in that moment? And it was like, hey, would you like to do a TED? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I would love to do one. And people think like you just get up there, especially people that speak for a living. They're like, oh, I know how to speak. I'll just get up there and I'll do my thing. There are so many rules that go along with the TED umbrella. Like, you can't say certain things. You have to be very on point. You can't promote yourself. You have to be sharing, something. It's ideas worth spreading, and that's what it's all about. So when I decided to do mine, I really was like, well, what is going to help people? When I talk, I want to give it as a gift, and I've always looked at that way throughout my whole career. If I'm opening my mouth, it better be a gift that I'm giving to people. And I talked about stress, and it was, it's all stress, the frazzler versus the silent stressor. And it was right after the pandemic. It was just when things were starting to open up. So it was so poignant to what was going on in the world. So I think people were just in awe by, yes, we are all stressed out. We are all having these issues. We're all facing medical issues because of stress. And, the fact that it just caught on and it spread, it was amazing. And I was getting people emailing me. I mean, I was walking down the street, and people would be like, I'm a frazzler, I'm a silent stressor. And that was pretty cool. That was actually very, very cool. And after that, like I said, it was just teach me how to do what you do. And so I do help people with their talks. Like if somebody gets a talk, they'll usually hire me to help them because there's 4 different things with TED real quick. Everybody wants to get onto YouTube. Like that's the goal. You can get onto YouTube. That's the best thing that happens. Some people, they do their talk and it doesn't even get put onto YouTube. They've said something where it's just flagged. Then sometimes people get onto YouTube, but then all of a sudden there's a disclaimer at the bottom saying, we do not support what this person is saying. And then there's the best thing that happened, and that happened for me, and I'm very blessed by that. TED picked it up and they said, this is awesome, and we want to showcase this on our website as well. So that really helped, I think, get the word out there on my message.
So do you think radio gave you that background to be a good TED talker?
I think it helped for sure. I think dealing with people, just not radio is so much more than just getting on the mic and talking. You know this. It's dealing with people, it's being part of their day, and I love being part of people's stories. I think that that's the most you know magical thing that we can do on this planet is being part of somebody else's story.
And what's interesting about what you just said, and Alex will perk up here when I say it, is that's part of the reason I'm the last angry DJ, because there was a difference in the way we used to communicate on the radio way back when, in the 70s and the 80s, is that we used to stand on top of Mount Olympus and we'd shout it out to the people. We'd be like, "Hey, everybody, it's $1 million weekend." Da, 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 da. That's not very conversational, but that's the way we did it because we were all about branding the radio. But that's gone. Those days are gone. Now it's more of a companion ship. You're there as a companion to the person that's listening to radio. And Alex has lamented a little bit of that personality that went away in the old days of radio. Alex, why don't you? I don't want to speak for you. Why don't you tell her how you feel about how the way it used to be versus how it is now?
Yeah, so I'm old enough to have grown up with radio, and I back in the '90s, my favorite radio station here in Vancouver is CFOX, very famous radio station. They've had all sorts of incredible musicians and celebrities on those shows. The most successful show that they had was the Larry and Willie Show. We've had Larry Hennessy here of the Larry and Willie Show as a guest on here. And he always told amazing stories. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I listened to him, was because he had an incredible, his breadth and depth of knowledge in music history and his comedic timing. I mean, he made me laugh so many times, and I was always engaged and locked in and looked forward. I would turn on the radio in the morning and listen to that show before school started. So for me, it was really about the personalities. They were interesting, they were knowledgeable, they were funny, and they were a little bit edgy. And I really miss that. I really feel that's completely gone away now. Everyone's playing it really safe. The whole landscape of radio has really, really changed. At least it has in Canada. I don't know about in the United States, but that's
it's all the same.
That's my perspective.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because the right DJ could present a core memory as a child. And I remember I was fantastic at like name that tune. So it would be the night show and they would have, like these little, 5-song scrambles or whatever. And I would call. I mean, I was barely old enough to dial, but I knew that radio station number by heart, and I would call in and I would answer, and they'd be like, "You want a prize?" I can't tell you how many prizes I've won and never picked up.
I'll challenge you to that, by the way. I will challenge you to no end about that because I'm really good at that. And being a radio guy, I know everything from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, 90s, and not so much, and the aughts, forget about it. But yeah, that's a great thing. And what Alex is saying, that companionship, if you learn to make that transition. Now, I'm a young 71-year-old guy. I still sound like a young guy, but I'm a 71-year-old guy. And I'm not so appropriate for radio because there are some cultural touch points that don't fit anymore. But I made that transition between being, the 10-second, 15-second intro, outro guy on a top 40 radio station at a big market, at a big radio station, and I made it down to this level, which is a little bit different. But I got there because I had to sort of slay the dragon in my head, the ego dragon that said, you have to do things the way you did back in the 70s in order to communicate today, and that's not true. And I think it's the same thing that you have to unteach people when you teach them presentation work, is that this is a whole different ballgame. If you were good at sitting around a conference room giving direction as the CEO of a corporation, and now you have a room full of people and you have a virtual audience in addition to that, so you might have an iMag screen next to you, and you're dealing with all these different levels, it's a different kind of a ball game. And on that subject, I think Mark teased a question that he has about doing presentations. Mark, why don't we just jump to you and let you ask your question about that, and let's see if Tia's got an answer for it.
Okay, Tia, what are the most common presentation mistakes you see from professionals who are otherwise very competent in their field?
I think the biggest mistake that a lot of people do in presentation is they lecture instead of have a conversation. I think that when you are talking at somebody, I always talk about we give other people permission to close their ears. And when we are talking at somebody instead of having a conversation, that's permission, number one permission to close their ears. And so I know for a fact with myself, but also, just by the science and everything that I've learned throughout the years with this is, if somebody comes in and they tell you a personal story on how, stars are made and, they saw a shooting star when they were a little kid and, they went and they were able to kick the ash and, like all of this stuff, that's going to be more, important to you. You're going to feel that. You're going to have visceral reactions going through a story that somebody tells because maybe you have something that relates to that, or maybe you always wanted to see something like that, other than somebody else coming up and saying, okay, well, I've worked at, the NASA my whole life and da 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 da. And they just start, giving you fun facts of just all this stuff that they learned. It's harder to retain that. When you walk out of that room, you're going to remember the personal story that somebody told, and you're going to remember the facts that came along with that story, opposed to the encyclopedia lesson that you got from somebody else. And really, that's one of the biggest mistakes I see with presentations. You see it in offices, you see it in on stages, you know, I don't want to call out like certain people, but even like certain TED Talks, you see people that are more relatable. Their talks are more relatable because they tell private stories or they ask questions, whereas conversation with the audience. So it's always important to have that.
It's also like death by PowerPoint. I can't stand that. I mean, when people are like, getting into a long soliloquy and they're reading back to me what's on the panel of the PowerPoint. I said, well, what is it? What are you doing here if all you're doing is reading back to me what's on the screen that I'm looking at? And it's just boring. I love it when people talk to you.
Yes.
And they can't all be Garrison Keillor telling some fascinating story. But I love that. Mark, more questions. What do we got?
From Brett in Appleton, Wisconsin, what is an underrated or impactful storytelling technique you've seen to elevate nervous speakers from good to unforgettable?
Ooh, that is a really great question. I love that. So a lot of times people are very nervous. They get really in their own head when they're about to talk. So when I think it's important to really just make yourself not feel that eyes are all on you. One of the big techniques that I use, kind of like my secret sauce, is people don't want to look stupid, so I help them move past that by getting stupid, right? So it can be a very emotional process that we go through as we do it. So really, when we feel like all eyes are on us, we're so afraid of making a mistake, or we don't want to look bad, or we don't want to be judged, or things along those lines. So when we are getting vulnerable in a story, which is what makes you an incredible speaker, right? That takes you from mediocre to incredible when you can show vulnerability. I help people kind of break through that. And the most techniques really boil down to, not caring, like make yourself get past the point of caring. Like that judgment, it doesn't matter. How do you feel about yourself? Are you proud of yourself? Go with that in mind and be vulnerable and share. When I did my TED Talk, I shared probably the most vulnerable thing I've ever shared on a stage. And I believe that is the reason that people just wanted to hear what I had to say. And that was, I went through an issue, a medical issue, and it was shocking. And I did not see it coming. Nobody saw it coming. There were guests from the audience, and it was almost embarrassing to me to say I was this young and this thing happened to me. But it was so important to see how stress can really affect the body. And everybody was like, oh my gosh. So I think that really, really helps people connect with the talk and share the talk with others. And I think that when you can go and be vulnerable and get past that feeling judged or feeling stupid, because here's the fact, people would rather die than look stupid. There has been a study done on that. People would rather die than look stupid. And that's horrifying when we think about it. So, just go and be silly and own it.
We're talking to Tia Cristy, who's a presentation coach, in addition to being a personality that has been on radio and done very, very interesting things in her life. If you have questions for her, you can ask them right here at ask.thelastangrydj.com, and or you can just scan that QR code that's floating around over here, and that'll take you right into where you can ask your questions, and we'll throw them at Tia as we go along. What a great subject, talking about presentations. And you were just talking about stress and how to use it. I get stressed anytime I'm on the radio, and I've been doing this for like 50 years, by the way, on the radio in front of a lot of people. But I've learned to use that. It's that energy that comes across. And one time I asked my doctor, I said, is this okay? I mean, is it okay to have this much stress in my life? And he said, Mitch, I've never known anybody to die from going on stage and facing a bunch of people. I mean, just basically, that's the worst thing that can happen, isn't it? Isn't that the worst thing? You're thinking, I'm going to freak out, or I'm going to jump up and down or pass out in front of all the people. Well, guess what? It's not going to be that horrifying, and probably something very memorable. Have you ever had any crazy shit happen when you have somebody on stage and the worst could happen, and they turned it into a positive? You kind of hinted at it.
Well, I think that, people do get nervous. And I just want to give you this one scientific fact. The chemical brain drop that happens, right, is the same whether you are excited or you are afraid, right? So you have the opportunity, and it's only like 0.0025 seconds, but you can say, I'm excited, and your body will respond that way. If you say that you are afraid, your body's going to respond that way. So I always tell people, before you do something that's going to be that adrenaline, make sure that you call it exciting, because your body will respond that way. And it makes such a difference when you're able to do that. Our bodies are pretty simple. They're complex, but simple. So if you tell them that's what it is, it's going to believe you. Now, as for other people, some people that I had not worked with, I saw some really just, deer in headlight moments happen on stage, and, you just feel for the person so bad. Some people that I have worked with, they will get to that deer in headlights moment, but because they worked with me, they know that even though it feels like, and in radio, this, even though it feels like a really long time, it's not. So when you're sitting there and you're like, I forgot what I was about to say, and you're like, oh my God, the way that you react is what's going to tell the audience how to respond, right? So if you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. Now they're feeling empathy, they're feeling sympathy, oh my gosh, they lost where they were. And now all of a sudden it's a big thing. But if you sit there and you act like you are in the emotion of what you're talking about, people are with you. They're feeling it. All of a sudden, I had this one client, and they were talking about something really, really emotional. It was a loss of a family member, and they completely lost where they were going with this story. And it was brilliant. What he did was he just did one of these, and it looked like he was taking a moment, and he was in the emotion, and he was verklempt, and he had to, kind of get himself back on track. And the audience, I mean, when he was done, the audience, they were in tears, and they thought that was the most moving thing. And of course, he comes off stage and he's like, I totally forgot where I was going. And so that was our little secret, and now I've just shared it. But it's one of those things where if you can react the proper way, you're going to be just fine. And you're allowing the audience, again, it's a conversation, you're allowing them to feel in that moment. And it's a beautiful, beautiful process. So,
And
yeah.
Tia, what from the audience perspective, I'm curious how you feel about this. If somebody's having a vulnerable moment on stage, sharing something deeply personal, why is it that we connect with that story? Even if, for example, you may have experienced something, gone through something that I can't really relate to, but somehow I find that incredibly moving and I connect with it. Why is it that people connect with something even though they may not have had that exact experience? Why do we, as human beings, why do we find that so compelling?
Yeah, well, there's certain keywords, right, that take us into our own stuff because it is about our own stuff. We are constantly, thinking about ourselves, and it's not that we're selfish beings, but we can be very self-centered. We want to make sure that we are safe. We want to make sure that we are in the right place, that we are learning the right things. And so when somebody says like specific keywords, like, I don't know, let's just say skydiving. I never went skydiving before, but all of a sudden, you're telling me a story and you're telling me about the fear that you felt right before you're about to jump out of that plane. Well, yeah, I'm gonna feel that. I'm gonna feel that reaction for you, especially if you're using certain keywords, because guess what? I've been afraid of things before. Oh my gosh, there's the number one keyword, right? You have you have triggered within me that feeling. Okay, yes, I know what it's like to be scared of something. Boom. Now I can relate and I am now invested in what you're telling me. So remember when we are telling a story as well, like we don't need to sit there and say it was a Friday or it was a Tuesday. Have you ever had a conversation with somebody that's like, I think it was Thursday. Wait, was it Friday? No,
Yeah,
Saturday. And
absolutely.
you're like, what? Why does it matter? That doesn't matter. What you need to do is you need to be able to trust your audience and you start to paint the picture and then you hand them the paintbrush. Okay. So what you do is maybe you say, okay, it was a weekday and the sky was blue and I was in a purple dress and I felt beautiful that day. Have you ever felt that beautiful? Well, that's how I was feeling that day. And boom, I just took you into a moment and you're like, yeah, I have. I felt that beautiful because we have attention spans of goldfish. Actually, we have shorter ones than them. So when we are able to throw in key wording like that, and we're allowed to give you a moment to sit there and say, oh, yeah, I felt really pretty last week. I felt really handsome. All of a sudden, now you took your goldfish moment, as I like to call it, but then I say something and I bring you back in because now you're invested. Now you want to know why I felt so pretty or what happened that day. So it's these moments that you allow other people to become invested, and it's like dropping seeds. It's dropping these little keywords that make people feel related to the story, whether they experienced it or not. And it
Isn't
happens
it
all
isn't
the
it
time.
true that goldfish can only hold one thought in their mind at the same time, one
I
at a time?
I think so, but I didn't do that part of the study. I'm
No, I
just
was just
I'm
wondering when
just
you said it
very
at first.
aware.
Yeah, okay, I got it. So are you
They're at
thinking it?
9 seconds. I believe we're at 8.
Okay, all right, fine. Now, when you're talking at an event, and maybe you're using a little, maybe you're going off the script a little bit, and of course, all the producers and the people that are running the show are getting very nervous at this point. How far ahead do you think? I mean, are you anticipating what you're going to say? Is it okay to go off the script a little bit? Maybe there's something happening right in the room at that moment where you need to respond to it. I mean, how serious are you about keeping them to the plan, as it were?
So for me, I think well, when we're talking about TED and TEDx, it's very important to stick to the script. Like very important. You don't want to deviate from things because I always tell people it's like a sweater. You can't knit more to make it bigger in the middle. Like it doesn't work. The whole sweater's a wreck then, right? So you really want to stick to your plan with something like that. But when I'm talking with large groups, now I have my science and I have my slides and I have all of that stuff going on that is kind of the same for most people, but all of a sudden I realized that, you specifically need to talk more about how to communicate with, your your best friend or your girlfriend or something like that, and we're gonna deviate from going too far on this topic, and we're going to focus a little bit more on that topic, and that's okay. Like, I love doing that because I think the point for all of us is to meet people where they're at. It's not about me when we're having a conversation, it's about you, right? So if I'm wanting to be invested in your story, I'm going to ask you the questions. I'm going to stick with what you need to help with. I'm not just up there, so I can talk and hear myself. I want to help you. I want somebody to get value out of what I'm teaching them.
Got it. Mark, do we have more questions that are being asked out there?
We have quite a few questions. Tia, from John Edelson in Monterey Bay, what is the most impactful thing you learned from one of your clients?
Oh gosh, I learn so much from my clients all the time. I think one of the things that I really love learning, and I learned this from a lot of people, is the fact that people don't feel confident in their speaking abilities, right? So a lot of times people feel like, why would anybody want to hear what I have to say? And it's just so amazing to learn that every single time, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the level of employment of a client. This is like from the bottom of the food chain to the top of the food chain. This happens all the time, and it's just really amazing. I I think that a lot of us have this mindset like, oh, well, when you hit a certain level in life, you're not going to feel self-conscious anymore, or you're not going to feel imposter syndrome anymore, or you're not going to feel stupid anymore. And the fact is that we all feel that no matter what level we get to. I love to tell people when we're starting out, we got to get over the hump. We got to get over the speed bump. And then, oh, we hit a wall. We got to get past the wall. And then when we get to the top level, we're like, oh, we got to hit this, we got to break through the ceiling. We're hitting the ceiling, so it's really amazing to see. So I love to teach people how to really find their authentic voice. And, honestly, if you are not the authority on the subject, then you shouldn't be speaking. You should be listening. It's the most powerful thing we can do.
For the record, I'm one of the most neurotic people out there, and certainly on this panel right now. And my inner voice is Barry White, just in case you were wondering.
I love that.
Barry White is always going through my head. And it's like if the music's playing and I'm talking about old stuff, I'm going, Neumann U87, 8-track tape, Billy Joel, I'm just it just goes through my head. Anyhow, you had to be there. I got a quick question I'd like to ask before we go back to the regular ones. What does it mean to be your own upgrade?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So I just posted about that. So a lot of times, especially when we get to this time of year, everybody's like, oh, resolutions. And, the science behind it is 80% of the people that make a resolution will fail at it within 30 days. It's just the way it goes. And I think I've never done the resolutions. I've always made decisions. And that's part of being your own upgrade. So you don't have to make a resolution. You don't have to sit there and say, oh, and the example is like, oh, I want to lose weight. No, you have to make a decision. I will lose weight. I will lose 10 pounds by March. That's a decision. I'm going to make that happen. That is your own upgrade. When we just sit there and say, oh, I need to lose weight. Well, guess what? By February, you're sitting there eating the whole chocolate cake and, you're like, I don't know what happened. It's okay.
Hey,
it's just a way for us to.
On that subject of chocolate cake, I have a theory. I just want to jump in here. because I do interrupt very well. My doctor said the same thing. He said, "Bet you got to lose weight." I said, "You always say that. Tell me something I haven't heard in a while." Like, well, you're ugly too. But anyhow, chocolate cake. Here's my quick answer to that. It's okay to eat a chocolate cake, but eat the best chocolate cake that you can find. Don't bother eating bad chocolate cake or chocolate cake is substandard. Just hold out for the very best, tastiest chocolate cake you can have, and then you can say you had it and you had your way, or you had it and you had your cake too, I guess. So sorry to interrupt you, but I just had to.
No, I love
my
that.
2
I love it.
cents.
I am a big advocate for don't deprive yourself. When we deprive ourselves, that's when we end up becoming gluttonous on anything, right? So, if we say, "Oh, I'm never going to eat chocolate cake again," like that's not going to work for most people. Like, me, I don't eat chocolate anymore, but so it works for me.
What?
But, like somebody else, like you can't say that, Mitch. Mitch, you be like sneaking it down at 3 o'clock in the morning, eating the chocolate cake and being like, I don't
You
even
bet.
remember, but it's don't deprive yourself, have a small piece of chocolate cake, have a small piece of chocolate cake every day if that's what it takes. But, don't eat the whole cake in one sitting, do what you got to do.
I'm not happy until the entire cake is gone. That's the way. That's an addiction. That's an addiction for me.
That is.
With
that's
chocolate.
A whole
It's like,
nother,
if
that's
it's
a whole
there,
nother talk.
I'm rationalizing in my head, I can have a second piece because it'll be not quite as good tomorrow or whatever else. So, it's a problem. What can you do? Let me jump over to Mark. Mark, you got a question you'd probably like to ask, and I'm sure we'd like to hear the answer that Tia has.
Sure.
Okay. Is presentation skill more about confidence, or is it something much more technical than people realize?
It is. Okay, so with presentations, people have to do presentations all the time in offices and things like that. And all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I gotta do a PowerPoint or whatever. But it comes down to exactly like what Mitch said. It's not a skill. It is confidence. It is conversation. And when we get too wrapped up in our own minds, we're just throwing numbers at people, and it's boring. Like, the person giving it is a wreck. They're a nervous wreck because I don't speak in front of people and I have to give this presentation. And then they're sitting there and they're talking all, meekly, and they're just kind of pointing at things and da 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 da. And like, there's nothing entertaining about that. Right. And, I think some people have even questioned me, why does it have to be entertaining? It's life. Everything has to be entertaining. If we're going to learn, it has to be entertaining, right? Other than that, we're just, it's like, watching paint dry. And, so if we can bring in the entertainment to the presentation, it does. It holds confidence. It holds authority. Again, if you're not the authority on a subject, why are you having the presentation? And it does happen. Bosses are like, oh, well, you just got to do it anyway, okay. But I think for the most part, if you can find a way to make it relatable, and find out, I always love to tell people, find out how you want to be perceived when you are giving a presentation, right? If you are giving just even a talk, I work with lawyers who, they're in courtrooms and, it's a presentation of some sort, but what are you trying to perceive? What persona are you trying to have people, see and walk away saying, oh, I saw that person. I heard and I understood, right? Because that's all we all want, is to be seen, heard, and understood. So with my talk, like I went into my TED talk knowing I wanted to be funny. Absolutely, hands down, I wanted to be funny. And I made people laugh about 5 seconds into it. I succeeded. Boom. My confidence soared, right? But even if it didn't soar at that moment, I still would have kept going because I knew that I wanted to be funny. I wanted to be educational. I wanted to be relatable, and I wanted to be vulnerable. And I was able to knock all of that out of the park. I was able to sit there and say, when I first got off the stage, I had no idea actually what I said. I was like, oh my God, what did I even say? And everybody was like, it was good. But I was like, okay, I believe you.
It was brilliant. It was all your gold. as they say. And a case in point, I had a time in my life where, I know I'm telling one of my stories, so here we go.
That's good.
Put up with it. It's my show.
It
I
is.
went from being a disc jockey on a big top 40 radio station in Philadelphia, coming out of retirement like 20 years later to do the morning show at WSTW, a station that you worked at, not at the same time I did. And they asked me to do the morning show to help out somebody who was taking a medical leave, turned into 3 years, by the way. And I was a little bit of a nervous about it because a morning show on a radio station is more about relating to people and talking to them and, getting them started like a cup of coffee does. And I was worried because all of my previous experience was talking for 10 seconds. And, here's Billy Joel and, whatever. And I was like, what am I going to do? And first thing I asked, well, who's going to be the cast of characters that's going to be in there with me doing the morning show? And I immediately decided that I would be the ringmaster, but I was not going to be the star of the show. The people in the room with me were going to be the interesting people, the newscaster. In this case, it was Stephanie Montagna, the sportscaster, who was Big Don Volts. Our engineer, Scotty Moyer, is just a really, hardcore technical guy. And I just brought him in as different characters, like on a Seinfeld, which was, a show about nothing. And I found that people were related to the camaraderie and the family that I was building. And then I brought the audience into it and the areas because I know the area very well. And I realized I don't have to rely on being outright funny. I have to rely on being honest. And if mistakes happen, then just own that mistake. And we did very well with that, and I felt very comfortable doing that. And it was just it was just a revelation for me. And probably I took it into presentation skills and things like that. But in a sense, isn't that kind of what you were just talking about? Is that you got to kind of own it, and then you have the it's like here I'm going to screw up once in a while. I'm going to be wrong, and I tell all my guys here that hey, just call me out if I'm going to do something wrong. I know I talk too much. I know that's the next thing somebody's going to say. And Mark is shaking his head up and down. You can't see it, but he's saying, yeah, you talk too much, Mitch. And we do have a guest here. So, Mark, why don't you jump in and you ask a question?
Okay. What's one simple change people can make that instantly improves how they come across?
Nice. I would say breathe. Breathing's super important. Most people don't breathe. I'm going to give you a trick. Everybody do it. Put one hand on your chest, one hand on your stomach with the pinky going into the belly button, and just breathe. Just breathe. And tell me which hand is moving.
The belly button.
Okay. Mark?
Top hand.
Top hand. Alex?
Oh, sorry, I didn't do it. I'm multitasking. I'm pushing a lot of buttons here, so it's really hard for me to. It's hard for me.
Oh, that's all right. But okay, so actually, you want both hands moving in tandem. So keep on doing it until you feel both hands moving, and it will. Now that I've made it a conscious mind thing, it will start to happen, and that is when you are breathing. You want to make sure that you're breathing like that. And most people, they're not. They're holding their breath. They're nervous. They don't want to talk. Oh, it's almost my turn, and that really can make a huge difference if you're breathing. It makes you so much more relatable.
I used to suffer from anxiety attacks. I probably have the capability of having it any time, but I haven't had it in years. And I had one on the air, and it was all about breathing. Because I got my mind wrapped up in, oh, here it comes, here it goes, and then you just don't realize that your body's going into fight or flight mode, and you're getting anxiety, and you're just your breathing is so way off the scales. And again, the worst that can happen is you might pass out from hyperventilating. But if you just take a deep breath, let it relax, and let Barry White talk to you in your head, it goes away. So yeah, the breathing, I'm with you on that 100%. I think it's a great tip.
Exactly.
Can you watch somebody and tell?
I'm sorry?
Can you watch somebody and tell if their breathing's going off?
I can, but it's because I've been doing this for so long and I've studied it, so I can tell because I can tell how they talk. Most people,
Ah.
body's so fascinating, right? So, when you speak, where do you feel it? Do you feel it in your diaphragm, in your stomach, or are you feeling it up here? Are you feeling it in your chest? Are you feeling it in your nose? The body loves to conserve energy. It's super smart that way. But what happens is the longer we've been talking, the better our vocabulary's gotten, the worse we are at communicating, right? So when we're children, we know how to speak and we know where to speak from. So I teach people how to get it back to where we need to speak from. It's wild, and it's such a cool process to do. And so when somebody's not breathing correctly and they start talking, I can tell. I
How,
can really tell.
how do you teach radio people that had the old time radio voices that were taught AM radio? That radio voice that projects and sounds loud. It's like I'm stuck with it. I learned it in the 70s, and in
Mhm.
conversation I can really physically force it down, but I'll be out to dinner. Could I have the ketchup, please? Or
Well, yeah, and
how is the steak being done? It just comes out and I can't stop it. And people
mhm.
turn and stare at me. And I have a T-shirt that says, "Don't make me use my radio voice." So I use
Ah,
it as a tool sometimes. You can own a room with a radio voice if you know how to project and use it when you really need it, because you can, like on a Zoom call, I got the microphone, I've got the pipes, I can do that. But it comes across insincere. It's a tool you can overuse very easily.
well,
So
yes, and I
anyhow,
agree with that. I agree with that because I think everybody's mind says, "Well, if I lower my voice, I sound like I have more authority," and that's not true. When you speak with your natural voice, that's when you have the most authority, and that's what I teach people to get back to. Like radio voice is totally, totally different. You did come from the era of, it was all up here and da da da
yep.
da da la 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 la, and it was when I came into radio, it was don't use that voice, because we heard it growing up. We were like, oh my gosh, that's how you talk. No, don't use that voice. Like just
Well, you
talk. And,
worked at,
you
at
know,
WIOQ,
yes.
Q102, right?
Yeah.
And
Q102.
were you there when Harvey was there doing the mornings? Harvey was the first DJ I ever heard that was
Mm-mm.
very conversational. He was
Yeah,
very,
no.
very
So
friendly.
when I was there, I was Tio with Chio in the morning, and we had Diego, and it was a
Okay,
nice
a little
bunch
later.
of
Sure,
people. Yeah.
sure, sure.
So it was it was
But
it
there
was
were,
fun, and there was a lot that we brought to the table. Like you said, we all had our different personas that we bring to the table. And with that, though, a lot of things happen, that you don't expect to happen. I remember one time I was up in a different radio station and the lighting above me shattered and glass was just
ooh,
raining down on me as I was on the radio. And I just closed my eyes and I just made it sound like it was the most exciting thing on the planet. I was like, I hope you all get down here to this event because look, I mean, glass is shattering. We are breaking ceilings over here. And I went on and I was like, blah, 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 blah. And I made it super wonderful. And all of a sudden I was done. I did my sign off and I pulled down that mic and, um, thank God, they saw the explosion from outside and everybody came running in and they dusted me off. But it was like, you just have to go through it.
just
You
tell him it
have
was
to.
Lionel Richie dancing on the ceiling. That's
Right,
I don't think
exactly.
you played that on your format, but that's what I would
No,
have
no.
responded to. The other thing they teach in radio is if you make a mistake, don't stop and say, "I just made a mistake," because that's like one of the,
Right.
the first rules of radio is don't acknowledge it, just keep going. Because people will be sitting there going, did he just make a mistake? So if you're mispronounced somebody's name or a product or a service in a presentation, just keep going. Don't stop.
Right.
Don't stop to
Yeah,
call
and
attention to the error.
I think we're in a different kind of society now where it's okay to own the mistake, And of course it's different levels, right? Yeah, you still don't want to do that on radio. You don't want to do certain things on a TED stage, but like if you're at a presentation and you're giving out these facts about the company or something like that, and all of a sudden, somebody calls to your attention that was wrong. I think it's absolutely fine to be like, oopsie, like I'm I'm only human, and to remind people that we are human is really a great way to connect with people nowadays too. I think that when you can show that, um, because there was this time in history where people wanted to see people fail and they didn't, and it's horrible, but
Mm.
like that was a thing that people wanted. And I think nowadays when somebody can say, oops, I made a mistake, or oops, I fail and I get back up every single chance I get. Um, that really can be inspiring, and it can move mountains for people, I think. So
Sure. We have some questions coming in from YouTube. Do you guys have any way of reading them into the show here? I know I'm catching some guys off guard here. Mark?
Well, I don't see any questions. I see some comments. That
Comments
says,
are all right. We like those.
Great interview, guys. And then I won't mention a name, but I think you know who this is, Mitch. Says the new Mrs. Hill. So
You would do
Steven
that
Stryker.
to her?
Steven Stryker.
Oh,
Okay.
dear. Steven
Here's some
Stryker.
questions. When you have to give a technical presentation, that includes a deck. What are the most words that you want to put on a slide at a time before you bore people to death?
okay, so I think that you are allowed to fluctuate in that. I know, like, even for me, one of the things that I talk about is um, how miscommunication can deteriorate a relationship. So there are certain steps that go through that. And yes, there's a lot of words on that slide, but it's very colorful, and I go through it and I talk very big and bold about the whole thing. Um, but then I have other slides that have maybe one or two words on that, and um, they're eye catching, and I have one that says "just stop." That always puts people, like, it makes them stop dead in their tracks. Like, okay, just stop. And I'm talking about, just stop when you're getting so overwhelmed and you are feeling like you are lacking in communication, and you're getting pushed and pulled in all these different directions. And, especially when it comes to your home life and your social life, sometimes you just need to stop. You just need to stop and say, I need a minute. I need a minute for myself. I need to decompress. I can't handle all these things coming at me. Give me 5, and be true to your word. If you say it, do it. If you say I need 5 minutes, 5 minutes later, you return and you're ready to answer.
That's great. Mark, any more questions coming in?
We've got a number of questions here. John from Monterey, California. Is it easier for you to coach people, older or younger individuals than you? A follow-up question is, different when you coach men versus women versus kids?
Um, no, for the most part. Kids, yes, a little different, but no, kids should be talked to the same exact way as you're talking to anybody. I mean, they're tinier people. Maybe the words are different. Maybe I'm not going to say a visceral reaction, and I'm going to say, it made me jump or something like that. I might use smaller words, but I think for the most part, kids don't want to be talked to in a way that makes them feel smaller than you. They want to feel understood. And kids also are very excited to teach you how something is and how something goes. Sometimes we sit there and we say, oh, it's so hard to talk to a kid because they know everything. Well, then let them teach you. That's what I say. Let them teach you. Because if they're teaching you, then you can learn something, and then you can share your own, experience in that. Again, it becomes a conversation. It's a really beautiful process. Now, for men and women, no, usually the conversation is about the same. Sometimes women want to hear a little bit of a difference, just because women did have to deal with so many different angles, in their climb up to their, founder or CEO, or, these upper tier jobs that they have. Um, and I like to give them that safe space to be able to talk about that stuff. And sometimes I really have to get in with women, and I have to kind of rewrite the script on that think like a man, or, that whole, boss babe kind of, and don't get me wrong, boss babe it's wonderful, but like they have this, I need to speak firmly, I need to speak loudly or almost nasty to get heard and understood, and I have to tell them that's not true. It's how we communicate with people, is when we are heard and understood. And I really found this cool. I just love this study. And I just heard this. So most of the time we have these things instilled in us. And for men, it is usually to be a hero. And for women, it is to be a nurturer. And it is just instilled in us. It is not taught to us. It is how we are when we come out, basically, right? So a lot of times what happens is that with women, there is a maternal side in with women, right? And usually happens after they have children or when they're ready to have children. But for a man, what's the number one thing a man says? I don't want her to talk to me like she's my mother, right? It's usually where a lot of relationships fail. And what happens is a woman now needs to understand that when she is talking in her nurturing, natural way, she needs to put up this boundary of that maternal side kicking in when she's talking to somebody of equal, level, whether it be same age, same position, same, just same. So it's really interesting when we can really dissect that and find out like that part of communication is a breakdown. I mean, I get really nerdy about it. I'm like super excited to really understand the science behind that.
What you're saying is very powerful, and you got my full attention, even without PowerPoint, which is nice to be able to say. But
Yes.
yeah, it's great. We do this thing that we like to call ruthless reviews. And I'm just going to give you the opportunity. This is your first experience on our show. We like to think that we're as good as we can be. But what kind of a review would you give us? And don't hold back. Tell us what you think. How's your experience been on this program?
I love it. Oh my gosh, I'm having a great time. I mean, y'all have me very nervous because of your beautiful backgrounds and everything, and just
It's intimidating,
I was very
isn't
nervous. You made me work up sweat before we even got on here, right? I know, and you told me that you were like, "We're just beautiful people, you're gonna have to catch up." So I was a little nervous.
We don't do that on purpose,
That's
but
just
we
Mitch
do.
speaking for himself.
Yeah, we do a little gear shaming from time to time. We used to be on a show called Office Hours, and some of us still are. I used to be on, and a lot of the quality of the video and the presentation and the background is that we've decided that there are certain levels that are good for making a presentation, and having a good camera image, good lighting, a nice background that says something about what you do, and that's what I have here. And you'll see the same thing on Mark and on Alex. And we're going to encourage you, as a Ruthless Review, to, just a little bit increase on your camera. Don't try to rely on your MacBook or your iPhone, because that's what good enough has made a lot of people get by with. There's a whole different level that you can take advantage of, and people will take you a lot more seriously too, believe it or not.
I'll tell you,
I know.
everything that everything that I've been doing. I mean, this year has been so substantial for me. I came from major market radio, beautiful blessing. I did the viral TEDx, and everything that I do has been word of mouth, which has just been outstanding. And I was very blessed this year to speak. I was asked to speak at Princeton University and a couple other universities,
Cool.
and like it's been substantial, and it's so funny. Like it's hard for me to catch up because the momentum's really kicking in, and I'm just getting outstanding clients and things like that. So I will upgrade my camera. I promise.
It can be done very easily. Alex will help you with that. That's
Thank you,
something that
Alex.
we insist on. We are again, we're a little bit of a gear shamers here when it comes to that, but that really has nothing to do with the content. but it does have a lot to do with your image quality and stuff like that. And you're a beautiful woman. You deserve to look as good as you possibly can. In spite of all the downfalls of the gear, you look very good and you sound very good, and we love what you're talking about. And before we wrap things up, we'll give everybody one more chance to get a question in at ask.thelastangrydj.com. We'll get that on there as soon as you can. You can do it quickly by hitting that QR code. And we'll go over to Mark right now and see if we can wrap up any more questions.
Okay. How does presenting on camera different from presenting in a room? And what mistakes do people make when they assume it's the same?
Yeah, it's very terrible to assume it's the same. So, really quick background. I started out as a club DJ talking to people, big audiences. It was wonderful. Then I got picked up to do radio, and it was a room of one, me and a microphone. That was it. And it was totally different. And I was talking to a whole lot more people, but I was alone in doing that. So I really had to adapt and understand that I was talking to one person. And I think when you then realize that you're on camera, I always found it almost nerve-wracking for me being on camera at first when I started. And it was like, oh, and I even would put something to block me on the camera so I didn't have to see like the playback or anything like that. And it was wonderful. I just started to learn how to ignore mine, so I wasn't getting all like crazy and being like, oh, does that look okay? It's really interesting when you are doing this more of like a solo thing or just a few people in the audience. So like with the TED Talks, sometimes there's a very large audience, sometimes there's not a very large audience, but your audience is the world, and that's who you're speaking to, and you have to remember that. But you also have to remember you're only looking to help at least one person in that audience. And when you can do that, it's really just a beautiful thing. And that's why you want to be able to connect. That's why you want to be relatable. And that's why you're not casting a wide net like, oh, I want everybody to like me. Go in, be the authority, and be that message that you're trying to share. It's super important to do that.
And for you, it was a perfect storm of experience in radio, TED Talk, podcasts, things like that. And we did talk briefly a little bit off the air about you doing podcast. And what was interesting is that I've been retired from radio for ages, and a lot of retired radio guys, some of them big guys, are doing podcasts, and they're just rehashing what they did when they were on the air, and it's boring and it's useless, and I don't know how to tell them, but you're wasting your time. It's boring. And when I got talked into doing a podcast, I guess I talked myself into it, so I was talking to myself. It was sort of like, all right, you have something to contribute, then let's do it. But let's make it interesting. And that's why I came up with the name, my partner did actually, The Last Angry DJ, was I said, well, if I'm going to be the last angry DJ, then the younger guys got to come on and represent for the millennials out there. And that's what Alex does. And we've kind of held to that pretty true. Alex, do you think so? Have we held true to the theme that it's the old guy and the young guy, and there's a little bit of rub there from time to time?
I think so. And you know what? I'm not the one to really answer that question properly. We should ask the audience. And I know I've actually gotten that feedback from a few people that watch this show. So I think we're on the right track with that.
Yeah, thank you. And Mark, he's sort of he's our steady keel that keeps us straight and narrow, because he owns radio stations and he's got to be the important businessman, and he's not going to step out and be edgy. He's just going to make a face every time I say something wrong that's irritating. But Mark, how do you feel about the relationship? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I love Mark. Mark, I think Mark should be on camera like all the time. Mark, your faces are priceless, and you've made me feel so welcome here. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Oh, that's so nice.
And we have one last question here that just
All right,
came
let's do
in.
it.
All right, from Brett in Appleton, Wisconsin. For clients lacking dramatic personal stories, how do you guide them to turn everyday moments into relatable, stage-worthy stories?
Great
Everybody's
question.
story. Yeah, that is just so awesome, because everybody's story is worth it, right? Not everybody's great storytellers. So I love to really get into what their personality is. What's their persona, right? What do they want to share? Again, do they want to be funny? Do they want to be sentimental? Do they want to be stoic? Like what is the person that you're trying to show, right? And once you know that, then you can take that story and you can really mold it into what it needs to be. Um, I like being humorous with things, but it's probably the DJ in me, if I'm being honest. It was always just one of those things. I was funny, and I always loved when people were like, "Oh, and she's funny too." I thought that was always a great statement. Oh, and she's funny too.
And
Um,
she's funny too.
right. Yeah. Like that was such a big surprise. But, when you can understand, like, this is okay, this is my persona and this is how I want to do it. So if I used to tell a story about me just taking my clothes to the dry cleaner, and it was hysterical. I had the meanest dry cleaner in the world who would tell me my clothes were ugly. And it was so funny. I know like, how amazing is that? And I love this person. Like, I thought she was absolutely wonderful. I thought she was so worthy of being part of my story, because it was, to me, one of the most hysterical things. And honestly, like, shows like Seinfeld were built around
Mm.
those dull moments and making them funny, making them worthy of sharing with other people. So know what your persona is, and once you know that, what you want to share with people. And not everybody is meant to be funny. Not everybody is funny. I love you all, but not everybody is meant to be funny. And I always try to use the example, like Tony Robbins. You know who Tony Robbins is, right? And he is so full of energy. He's on a trampoline before he's heading out on stage, and he makes it a little nightclub for his talks. Let's say you had to go on right after Tony Robbins and you had to talk about losing your first pet as a kid.
Mm.
That's like, whew, totally different. So how do you do that? You have to go in and you have to meet the people where they're at. And you have to, be like, that was amazing. And Tony's great, but can I talk to you about something serious for a minute? There is a transition that you can do going from that level to that level. And you won't lose a single person if you do it right. So that's what I help people do.
Wow. That's all I can say. Wow, with a big WOW. Great content, Tia. Thank you so much for being on the program. You bring a lot more gravitas and class to this program that it certainly does not exist. We don't deserve this. We're not worthy. But we would love to have you come back and continue to update us. I love the fact that you're a former radio person. And by the way, once a radio person, always a radio person. It's in your blood. Don't deny it. Take it with you. Embrace it. Make it yourself. And let that help you be whatever you have to be going forward. So thanks so much for being on the program today. Lots of interesting questions, and we're gonna be able to play this back as an audio-only podcast for people to comment continuously as we go along. And I reach out to my partner and producer, Mr. Alexander Knight, and say, Alexander, how do people continue to reach out and comment on this program after the fact?
Thanks, Mitch. One of the ways that they can do that is by joining our Discord community. We have a fantastic community here with all sorts of great conversation happening. So just scan that QR code that's hovering right there over my left shoulder. That'll get you into the server. We've got all sorts of channels to talk about the show, talk about broadcasts, talk about podcasts, or any kind of content creation. We have other channels too that are related to entertainment or industry news. It's a fun place to be. We'd love to see you there. And of course, you can also contribute to the show by becoming a Patreon supporter. You can go to patreon.com/TheLastAngryDJ. That's patreon.com/TheLastAngryDJ. Become a coffee supporter. That's what we call it. $2 a month. Just $2 a month will greatly help us as well. And of course, if you like this show as an audio-only podcast, you can find it wherever you find your podcasts. We're on Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Pandora, iHeartRadio, and all platforms. You can even ask your Amazon Alexa or any smart device to play The Last Angry DJ, and we will be there in your ears. Of course, you can watch it as a podcast on YouTube as well. We stream the show every Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific. That's 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'd also like to address and acknowledge everybody in the live chat today for asking those fantastic questions and chatting with us. We really appreciate you being here. And also would like to thank the fine folks at Boink Software for providing Memo Live. That's the production tool that we're using to bring this show to you live every single week in stunning 4K. We couldn't do it without you, so thank you to Memo Live. Back to you.
And that's why Alex is the best in the business. He can do that all without a teleprompter, which is an amazing talent to have. Mark, what did we learn today? Come on, what's the top line
Tia
thing
taught
you learned?
us how to breathe. Could we
Yeah,
ask for
I
anything
agree.
more?
I think that maybe you should do it to me with your hands, and I'll do it to you, and then we can check each other that way as we go. Yeah, that's the look we're looking for. So thank you, Mark, again. Your picture should remain on the screen the whole show, as Tia has suggested. So maybe we'll do that the next time we do a program. Tia, great to have you on. Once again, how do people reach out if they want to see more of what you talk about, other things that you do? It's not just presentations, right?
Right. Wow. Thank you. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me today. I had such a great time and you're all amazing. So I would love to come
Thanks.
back and hang out again. Easiest way to get a hold of me, social medias, I am Tips from Tia. It's all one word, TIPSFROMTIA. That's on, I don't know, Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff. So find me there. And then I'm on LinkedIn, Tips from Tia as well. And if you want to send me an email, you have any more questions, I would love to answer them for you. Or if you want to know more about what I do, you can just email me at Tia Cristy official, or yeah, I think that's it. Oh my gosh, I went blank on it. That's hysterical. Yeah, so we'll just say, you know what? We'll just give them my personal one. This is terrible. I can't believe I'm doing that. But you know what? They're friends of yours, so they're friends of mine now. And that would be tipsfromtia@gmail.com. That's my personal one. You'll get directly to me.
Nicely said. I appreciate that, and we'll look forward to having you on there. In spite of what Steve Stryker said, I'm way too old for you. I'm sorry, but what are we going to do? That's the way it goes. Next week it'll be the Broadcast Boffins, and we hope you enjoyed your Christmas holidays and your Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and all the other ones that are going on right now. We'll see you again next time. In the meantime, be very, very safe out there.
Swagger down the street with your red lips and funky beat. You better hold your head up to the sky. I'm gonna roll with you till the day I die.